Good evening, everybody. It's Friday, and it's 6 o'clock, so it is time for Flashcard Friday. And for tonight, I kind of wanted to stay in Proverbs a little bit, and uh, and talk about another way of applying the Bible in our lives. One of the things that we get asked a lot as pastors is how to apply this book to our daily lives when the culture that this was written in is vastly different, than it is today. And there are several ways to do that. Probably the most common one that you would see would be to look at things metaphorically. There's a passage in Revelation that talks about when Jesus comes back, he will have his tongue will be a flaming sword. Now that actually, that could actually be literal, that he comes down and fire comes from his mouth, or it could also be that the words, that he uses are so convicting and so to the point that they actually sear into our soul. And you'll see a lot of people will use some different things like that in the Bible, and talk about it metaphorically. What I want to talk about today is a little bit different, and it's going to be literal versus allegory. So, one of the things that I hear is, well, I can't apply this particular verse to me because I don't know any kings or rulers, or I don't hang out with drunkards and gluttons, and I don't have anything to do with the poor, and that type of stuff. So we think that it doesn't apply to us. But an allegory allows us to take that surface level, that literal look at the Bible, that surface level, and then go one step deeper and maybe change a word or a thought without changing the context of it, but to look at it a little differently. And I know a couple of weeks ago, I talked about a section in Proverbs in chapters 23, actually 22 through 24, that have 30 sayings that Solomon gave to his son. So again, obviously Solomon is a king and he deals with other kings and stuff like that. So this would have made a lot of sense to his son, where we might struggle with it unless we start to tweak it, a little bit. Again, not changing the context, not changing what it's saying, but maybe looking at it a little differently. So there's a passage in here, and you're going to have to forgive me. I didn't think to write the verses down, so it's going to take me a second to find them. But there is one in here. Here it is. It's chapter 23. It's verses 1 through 3. When you sit down with a ruler, note well what is before you, and put a knife to your throat if you're given to gluttony. Do not crave his delicacies, for that food is deceptive. Okay, now, again, Solomon is talking about a king and a ruler, but what if we take an allegory and we go, when you sit down to dine with your boss, when you sit down to dine with your in-laws, when you sit down to dine with, maybe people at a fundraising event, and people who are of higher stature than you. I used to go to a couple of things for Second Chance Ministries and Forgotten Man Ministries. So, I got to meet the sheriff, more than once, and there were a couple of times that I actually sat at his table. Well, okay, he's obviously, he's a ruler in this perspective. So what this is doing, what this particular one is doing, is cautioning us, because the things that your boss likes, everything from the way he does business at work to, he may like soccer and you like football. all of those different things. Sometimes we want to get, we want to get all caught up in it, and we want to do things that will make our boss like us. Well, when we do that, we're being deceptive, um, and we're creating, we're creating that deceptive atmosphere, which is what verse 3 is talking about. It's like, you don't need to like soccer because your boss likes soccer. If you're a football fan, be a football fan. If your boss likes caked donuts and you like iced donuts, that's okay. When you start to crave what somebody else wants, what somebody who has authority over you, when you start to crave what they want, you're deceiving yourself because you're not being honest to yourself. So that's kind of one way to look at it. The drunkards and gluttons, um, do not eat the food. No, that's not it. There's basically, this one here, when he's talking about drunkards or gluttons, these are people who spend all of their money on this particular, on these two particular things, and it leads to their ruin. Okay? So now let's stop and think about that. Um, my husband likes to pick on me a little bit because I have an affinity for shoes. I will look at different I love cowboy boots and I love sandals and I love tennis shoes. So I have a tendency to have a few too many. Now, if I start taking our rent money, we own a house, we're purchasing a house. If I start to take that money to purchase shoes, I've now fallen into this category. So, again, this is where you kind of got to stop and think, what are those things that you do maybe to excess that you need to pay attention to? Because it can lead to your ruin. It doesn't always. Sometimes, like with me, my husband will kind of raise his eyebrow and go, the credit card bill is a little too high. And that's when I have to go, okay, I have been selfish in this particular arena, and I have to stop doing it. I have to start paying attention, to those kind of things. So what are those things in your life that may cause you to go astray, just a little bit, because again, if you catch it early, you can prevent yourself. And that's really what Solomon is saying. He's like, don't go over the edge. Don't even push that boundary. And then adulterous woman and wayward wife, they're actually in the same, they're in the same one, and it's in chapter 23, verses 26 through 28. My son, give me your heart, and let your eyes delight in my ways. For an adulterous woman is a deep pit, and a wayward wife is a narrow well. Like a bandit she lies in wait, and multiplies the unfaithful among men. So, obviously, if you're married to an adulterous woman, or you have a wife who's looking the other way, and it would be the same if you have an adulterous husband, or a wayward husband. Obviously that can be what this is talking about, but not everybody, goes through that. But maybe there are things that lead you astray, that cause you to go down a path that you shouldn't be going down. I'd love to read, and sometimes I love to read books that are not educational. They're just, they're just for fun. It's kind of an escape for me. And growing up, I loved Stephen King. I grew up on horror movies and horror books, and he was just the one that I gravitated to the most. And when I first started following Christ, that was the one area that God came at me right away, and he said, I want you to stop watching Stephen King, and I want you to stop reading Stephen King books. And trust me, that was a hard thing for me. But what he said was, it's leading you down a wrong path. There's nothing wrong with Stephen King books. There's nothing wrong with horror movies. A lot of people can watch them and they don't have any adverse reactions to them at all. But for me, uh, it makes me start thinking that way. It makes sometimes it can make me angry. It can make it hard for me, to go to sleep at night because I'll be thinking about the different ways that things were written in a book, and what happens is instead of focusing on God, I'm now focusing on a fiction book, and that's not the design that God has for me. So what are those things that lead you away from God? What are those things that cause you to say, I'll read my Bible later. I'll, you know what, I can watch church online later. I don't need to actually go in. I want to do this instead. Those are the types of things that can lead you down a path that you don't necessarily want to go down. And this one, an ancient boundary stone, that's one that a lot of people struggle with. And I really should have marked this one because it's a good scripture. But basically, here it is. It's chapter 22, verse 28. Do not move an ancient boundary stone set up by your ancestors. Now, obviously, in Solomon's day, they would use stones to denote, territory. So, like, this is Israel's territory, and this is the Edomites' territory, and that type of thing. And obviously, if you move one of those stones, that can actually lead to war. But what if, instead of an ancient boundary stone, what if we just take off the word stone and say an ancient boundary? What are those things that are passed down in your family from generation to generation that have brought you closer to God? Is it, like for me, it was anytime my grandmother would wrap me up in a hug, and it was one of those, she would call me to her lap, and I would just kind of curl up in there, and she would hum. She wouldn't sing because she didn't think she had a beautiful voice. I thought she had a beautiful voice, but she would hum. And what I didn't know at the time was she was humming hymns, and it's something that throughout my life it's always stuck with me. And it's one of those areas that obviously I don't have kids or grandkids, but I have nieces and nephews. And there are times that I get to do things like that with them. And that's a boundary for me that I'm not going to move. Um, Obviously I do in fact have a bad singing voice, so it's not something that you would want me to do. But the time that I get to spend with those nieces and nephews doing that particular thing, that draws me closer to God, and hopefully it draws them closer to God. So what are those different things in your world that have pulled you, that your mother did, or your father did, or your great-grandfather? What are those things that drew you closer to God, and helped you develop that relationship? That's an ancient boundary stone here. Exploiting the poor. Um, most people don't, don't do that. And basically, Solomon's saying, when you exploit the poor, it leads you to ruins. Okay, so let's take the word exploit out and let's put the word marginalize. That guy who hasn't taken a shower in a couple of weeks who sits next to you. How do you respond to that? Do you marginalize that individual? Do you cross the street when you see a homeless person? Or, when you see somebody who's got a bunch of kids and they're struggling to say, no, I can't buy this for you. We don't have enough money for that. It's what you do in those situations. If you marginalize and go, well, they should have known better, or they they should have made sure that that didn't happen to them. Or, I saw a post recently, where people were saying that this particular homeless group was, that they were exploiting people, and that they were throwing food away and stuff like that. And the first thing that I thought about was, when I do something for the poor, when every now and then I get the opportunity to go feed the homeless in excuse me, in Ann Arbor and in Detroit. And it's one of the coolest things that I get to do is to have conversations, because you learn so much, from people that things like that have happened to. But to me, they're blessing me. I'm not blessing them. They're blessing me. And if they take the food that I give them and they go and they throw it away, it doesn't matter. It's not about me giving them something. It's about what they're giving me. So again, when you think about what are the ways that you marginalize, and even take the word poor out, what are the ways that you marginalize other people? Is that drawing you away from God's perfect plan in your life? Is that something that you really want to be doing? And then the last one, I know I'm going a little long, I apologize for that. The last one I want to talk about is guidance to wage war. And again, yeah, I see I should have marked these. Darn it, because this one was good. I'm not going to waste you guys' time trying to find it. Again, in here he's talking about, for basically for Solomon's son to be smart and to talk to people who know more than he does before he even contemplates going to war with another kingdom. You need to make sure that you know how to do it, and that you know how to do it properly. So again, you get a brand new computer, and you don't know all of the connections. If you take 5 minutes and you talk to the guy at Best Buy, he'll actually walk you through it. That's kind of a simplistic. I don't know, simplistic. Computers scare me, but that's kind of a common sense look at one. But you have a teenager for the first time. What about talking to your parents? How do you walk your child through this? Talking to your grandparents, talking to a friend who's gone through that before. Maybe you're battling an addiction, or something like that. Talk to people who have gone through it. Because if you don't, you wind up going this way, and God wants you to go this way. And usually when you try and do things on your own, if you're anything like me, you're going to make mistakes. But if you have the guidance of somebody who's been through it and who understands it, they're going to be able to walk you through it, a little bit better. So, again, this is just one more way, to kind of look at Scripture and to take it, from a literal, which is a very good, which is a very good spot, but taking it that one step deeper and going, okay, how can I apply this kind of stuff in my own life? What are some takeaways that I can take from every verse in this book? This book right here, every verse applies to all of us. There are times that we think there's no way they're going to make that one fit, but trust me, it happens. This book is living, and it's living inside us, and each verse can apply. If we look at if we take the time to look at some different ways to actually look at that. So I hope you guys have a phenomenal weekend. I hope you have a safe one. It looks like it might be a pretty one, and I look forward to seeing you all on Sunday. We'll talk to you later. Bye.